March 26, 1943. Tunisia, just before dawn. The desert is silent, not peaceful, waiting. A cold wind drags sheets of sand across abandoned Italian trenches, while German sentries scan the darkness through binoculars. Somewhere beyond the ridgelines, engines are rumbling, hundreds of them, but nothing appears. No columns of tanks, no clouds of dust, no warning, only the growing vibration beneath their boots. For months, German officers had dismissed the Americans as inexperienced newcomers. They had watched green troops falter at Kasserine Pass. They believed the United States could manufacture trucks by the thousands, but not soldiers. Steel, perhaps. Discipline, no. To veterans of the Afrika Korps, America was an industrial giant with the instincts of a child. Its commanders were cautious, its troops predictable, its army slow. Then George S. Patton arrived. Almost overnight, the rhythm of the battlefield changed. Orders that once took days were executed within hours. Convoys stretched beyond the horizon. Broken vehicles disappeared and returned repaired before German reconnaissance could report them. Entire armor formations seemed to materialize where intelligence had insisted there was only empty desert. The Germans began asking an unsettling question. How could an army this new move this fast? The answer wasn't simply tanks. It wasn't better guns. It wasn't larger numbers. It was something far more dangerous. A way of making war that the Wehrmacht had not expected. One German officer would later write that fighting the Americans no longer felt like fighting individual divisions. It felt like fighting an entire nation that had somehow learned to move as a single machine. The numbers alone seemed impossible. Thousands of trucks crossing North Africa. Millions of gallons of fuel consumed. Entire supply dumps built almost overnight. And behind every destroyed Sherman tank, another was already on its way. For commanders like Erwin Rommel, whose campaigns had depended on speed, surprise, and relentless momentum, something extraordinary was becoming impossible to ignore. The enemy was beginning to move faster than he could, not because American soldiers were born better, but because they had learned to combine industry, logistics, communications, and aggressive leadership into a weapon unlike anything Germany had faced in Africa. The army many Germans had mocked after Kasserine was transforming before their eyes into one they could no longer predict, no longer outmaneuver, and perhaps no longer stop. So what changed between America's humiliating defeat at Kasserine Pass and the relentless offensive that began pushing the Afrika Korps toward collapse? How did a force once dismissed as inexperienced become one of the fastest-moving armies of the Second World War? And what exactly did Patton understand about modern warfare that convinced even Germany's greatest battlefield commanders that they were facing something entirely new? Because the answer wasn't hidden inside a tank. It was hidden inside an army that had learned how to wage war at a speed the world had never seen before. The story of Patton's army does not begin with victory. It begins with humiliation. February 1943. Kasserine Pass, central Tunisia. For the first time in the war, large formations of the United States Army collide head-on with the veterans of the Afrika Korps. The result is devastating. German armor punches through inexperienced American positions. Units become separated. Communications break down. Artillery is slow to respond. Retreat turns into confusion. More than 6,000 American casualties are suffered in only a matter of days. Hundreds of vehicles are abandoned across the rocky valleys. Fuel dumps burn through the night, sending black columns of smoke high above the desert. To German officers, it confirms everything they already believed. The Americans are rich, not dangerous. They have factories. Germany has soldiers. Many within the Afrika Korps expect North Africa to become another lesson in German battlefield superiority. But while German commanders celebrate, something equally significant is happening hundreds of miles away. The United States Army is studying every mistake, every failed radio transmission, every delayed artillery strike, every traffic jam, every command decision. Unlike many armies that try to protect reputations, the Americans dissect failure with remarkable honesty. Reports travel rapidly through headquarters. Training manuals are rewritten. Command structures are adjusted. Officers who cannot adapt are quietly replaced. The objective is brutally simple. Never lose for the same reason twice. One name soon begins appearing at the center of these discussions. Lieutenant General George Smith Patton, Jr. Patton already has a reputation that borders on legend. He believes speed is a weapon. Discipline is ammunition. Momentum is life itself. Where many commanders tolerate delay, Patton sees danger. A convoy stopped beside a road is not merely inconvenient. It is an invitation for disaster. A tank waiting for orders is already losing the battle. To Patton, hesitation kills more soldiers than enemy bullets. When he assumed command of the U.S. II Corps in March 1943, the transformation begins immediately. The changes are impossible to ignore. Helmets are mandatory. Uniforms must be immaculate. Weapons are inspected daily. Vehicles are cleaned, repaired, and fueled before anyone rests. Columns that once wandered across the desert in disorder now move with precision measured almost to the minute. Patton understands something that many commanders overlook. An army's greatest strength is not how well it fights. It is how quickly it is ready to fight again. Behind the front lines, mechanics work around the clock. Damaged Shermans arrive battered and smoking. Engines are replaced. Tracks repaired. Suspension rebuilt. Sometimes within hours. American supply officers establish depots with astonishing efficiency. Fuel, ammunition, food, medical equipment, spare engines, replacement tracks. Everything has a designated place. Everything is counted. Everything keeps moving. The German army, by contrast, is fighting a different war. Rommel's greatest victories have always depended on mobility, but mobility requires fuel. And fuel must cross the Mediterranean. British submarines, aircraft, surface ships. They hunt Axis convoys relentlessly. Tankers sink. Cargo ships disappear beneath the waves. Each lost shipment echoes across North Africa. A panzer without fuel is simply steel buried in sand. Rommel knows this better than anyone. He often jokes bitterly that his logistics officers fight a harder battle than his tank crews. Every offensive must be calculated against dwindling fuel reserves. Every kilometer matters. Every unnecessary movement is a luxury Germany cannot afford. Meanwhile, America is beginning to demonstrate something entirely different. Its supply system is not merely supporting combat. It is creating combat. Truck columns stretch for miles across the desert. Bulldozers carve new roads through barren ground. Engineers throw bridges across dry riverbeds almost as quickly as advancing troops arrive. Where German reconnaissance expects obstacles, American engineers create highways. Where Rommel hopes distance will slow the enemy, American logistics erase distance itself. German intelligence officers begin filing increasingly unusual reports. American movements no longer follow familiar patterns. Divisions appear earlier than expected. Artillery ammunition never seems to run low. Destroyed vehicles vanish from battlefields and somehow reappear days later. It is as if the Americans possess an endless reserve of machines. Because in many ways, they do. Back in the United States, factories operate day and night. Detroit has become an arsenal unlike anything in history. Automobile assembly lines now produce tanks. Locomotive manufacturers build armored vehicles. Refrigerator companies manufacture aircraft components. Entire industries have transformed into engines of war. Every week, ships unload fresh equipment onto North African docks. New trucks, new tanks, new radios, new spare parts. Germany replaces losses carefully. America replaces them relentlessly. At first, German commanders dismiss this as simple industrial wealth. But soon they begin to understand something far more unsettling. This production is not replacing Patton's army. It is making it faster. Every replacement vehicle means another unit stays mobile. Every shipment of spare parts means fewer breakdowns. Every gallon of fuel means another advance can begin before the previous one has fully ended. The battlefield itself is changing, not because of a revolutionary new tank, but because one army has learned that victory begins long before the first shot is fired. And in the deserts of Tunisia, Erwin Rommel is about to discover that defeating American soldiers is becoming far easier than stopping the machine that keeps sending them forward. The transformation is first noticed not on the battlefield, but on the map. German intelligence officers spread aerial photographs across their tables. Colored pins mark American positions from the previous evening. By dawn, the pins are already obsolete. Entire regiments have moved. Artillery has shifted. Supply columns have changed direction. Fresh armored units have appeared where reconnaissance aircraft had reported empty desert only hours before. At first, they assume the reports are wrong. Reconnaissance pilots are sent back into the sky. They return with the same answer. The Americans really are moving that quickly. For years, the Wehrmacht had built its reputation on operational speed. Blitzkrieg was never simply about tanks. It was about making decisions faster than the enemy could react. Commanders advanced before headquarters expected it. Bridges were seized before defenders organized. Entire armies collapsed because German columns never stopped long enough to be trapped. Now, for the first time in North Africa, the Germans find themselves trying to keep pace. Patton's orders are brutally simple. Attack continuously. If resistance is weak, push harder. If resistance is strong, go around it. If roads are blocked, build new ones. If fuel runs low, move the fuel faster. Every hour spent waiting gives the enemy time to recover. Every hour spent advancing steals that opportunity away. Patton demands movement with an almost obsessive intensity. His staff quickly learns that excuses are more dangerous than enemy fire. A delayed convoy commander might find Patton waiting personally at a crossroads. An idle tank crew receives questions no one wants to answer. Why aren't you moving? Where is your fuel? Where is your objective? The pressure is relentless, but it begins producing remarkable results. American armored columns no longer advance in isolated groups. Tanks, half-tracks, engineers, artillery, medical vehicles, recovery trucks, fuel carriers, radio detachments. Everything moves together. Each formation becomes a self-contained machine capable of fighting, repairing itself, refueling, and continuing the advance. German commanders had grown accustomed to attacking enemy units that eventually exhausted their ammunition, or ran out of fuel, or waited for reinforcements. Patton's formation seemed incapable of standing still long enough for that to happen. Destroy one company. Another arrives. Knock out several tanks. Recovery crews pull damaged vehicles away, while replacements roll forward. Bomb a road. Engineers repair it before sunset. The Americans refuse to lose momentum. One German officer records his frustration in his diary. We destroy vehicles all morning. By evening the road is full again. Another describes American logistics as an army that feeds itself while marching. The observations are becoming impossible to ignore. This is no longer the inexperienced force that stumbled through Kasserine Pass. This is a different army. An army learning faster than Germany can adapt. The contrast between the two commanders becomes increasingly dramatic. Rommel thrives on improvisation. He often drives to the front himself. He studies terrain through binoculars. He searches constantly for weak points. His greatest victories come from daring decisions made in moments of uncertainty. Patton is different. He believes preparation creates speed. Detailed planning allows bold execution. Every fuel dump established before the attack. Every bridge surveyed. Every ammunition convoy scheduled. Every radio frequency assigned. To outsiders, it appears rigid. In reality, it gives his army extraordinary freedom once the battle begins, because every soldier already knows where to go next. As Allied pressure increases across Tunisia, the Afrika Korps begins fighting a battle on two fronts, one against Allied soldiers, the other against mathematics. Every German advance burns precious fuel. Every retreat consumes even more. Replacement parts become scarce. Tracks wear out. Engines overheat. Vehicles sit abandoned, not because enemy shells destroyed them, but because there is no gasoline left to move them. Rommel later reflects that logistics have become the decisive factor in North Africa. His armored divisions still possess experienced crews. His commanders still understood maneuver warfare, but experience cannot replace fuel. Skill cannot manufacture ammunition. Leadership cannot create spare parts. The Americans, meanwhile, continue expanding their advantage. Convoys arrive daily through ports secured by Allied naval superiority. Cargo ships unload thousands of tons of supplies. Fuel drums stack into enormous pyramids across the desert. Mechanics establish repair parks capable of rebuilding entire battalions. The scale astonishes German reconnaissance pilots. They report endless rows of trucks, miles of parked vehicles, warehouses appearing almost overnight. Some officers dismiss these reports as exaggerations. Others quietly fear the truth. America has not simply deployed an army. It has deployed an economy. The psychological effect begins spreading through German headquarters. Previously, commanders worried about individual American units. Now they worry about the system supporting them. Destroying one column no longer changes the campaign. Another replaces it. Capturing one fuel depot accomplishes little. Several more already exist behind it. Every tactical success feels temporary. Every American setback seems reversible. The battlefield itself has begun favoring the side capable of replacing mistakes faster than the enemy can exploit them. Then comes the realization that troubles even veteran German officers. Patton is no longer reacting to Rommel. Rommel is reacting to Patton. Instead of choosing where and when to strike, the Afrika Korps increasingly finds itself responding to American initiatives. The operational tempo, the heartbeat of the campaign, has changed hands. And once an army loses control of the tempo, it often loses far more than territory. It begins losing confidence. For the first time in North Africa, the soldiers who had taught Europe the meaning of blitzkrieg are discovering what it feels like to be outrun. By the spring of 1943, something remarkable is happening across the deserts of Tunisia. German soldiers are no longer asking whether the Americans can fight. They are asking, how do they keep coming? It is a question with no easy answer. Every destroyed bridge is replaced. Every cratered road is repaired. Every battered Sherman that disappears behind the lines seems to return days later with a fresh crew and a full load of ammunition. The battlefield has become a contest not only of courage, but of endurance. And endurance is a battle the United States is uniquely prepared to win. Rommel understands this before many of his subordinates do. Throughout his career, he has relied on speed, surprise, and concentrated force. His victories in France, his lightning advance through Cyrenaica, his dramatic counterattacks across the Libyan desert, all are built on a simple principle: strike before the enemy can react. But now he faces an opponent whose greatest strength is not surprise. It is recovery. American formations absorb setbacks that would cripple other armies. A battalion loses half its vehicles. Within days, replacements arrive. An artillery unit fires thousands of shells during an offensive. Fresh ammunition follows close behind. Communications equipment is destroyed. New radios appear almost immediately. To Rommel, this is more than efficient logistics. It is a completely different way of waging war. The Americans are turning industrial capacity into battlefield momentum. German intelligence attempts to measure the scale of what they are facing. The reports are staggering. The United States is producing tanks by the tens of thousands, aircraft by the tens of thousands, trucks in numbers so vast that many German officers initially refused to believe them. By the end of the war, American industry will build well over 2 million military trucks, giving Allied commanders a mobility unmatched by any other nation. For every vehicle Germany struggles to replace, America is manufacturing hundreds more. The imbalance grows larger with every passing month. The war is no longer being decided only in Tunisia. It is also being decided in Detroit, in Pittsburgh, in factories stretching from coast to coast. Yet numbers alone do not explain Patton's success. Many armies possess equipment. Few know how to use it with such relentless efficiency. Patton insists that speed is a weapon equal to any cannon. He tells his officers that a good plan executed immediately is better than a perfect plan tomorrow. The philosophy spreads throughout the ranks. Junior commanders receive greater freedom to exploit opportunities. Radio communication shortens decision-making. Artillery observers coordinate devastating fire within minutes instead of hours. Engineers move with the leading elements instead of trailing behind them. Every branch of the army begins operating as a single organism. Instead of waiting for orders to filter down through layers of headquarters, units adapt in real time. The effect is astonishing. The Americans begin solving battlefield problems faster than the Germans can create them. German veterans notice another difference. The Americans rarely fight exactly the same battle twice. After Kasserine, their anti-tank defenses improve. Artillery coordination becomes more precise. Air support grows increasingly responsive. Infantry learns to work more closely with armor. Every engagement seems to teach them something new. One German officer remarks that defeating the Americans is becoming progressively harder. Not because individual soldiers have changed overnight, but because the entire army appears to learn from every mistake. It is an observation repeated in report after report. The enemy is adapting rapidly. For Rommel, the situation becomes increasingly frustrating. His own army remains tactically dangerous. German tank crews are still among the finest in the world. Their officers are experienced. Their doctrine has proven itself across Europe. But doctrine cannot compensate for shortages. Every decision is constrained by fuel. Every maneuver depends on dwindling supplies. Every counterattack risks exhausting resources that cannot easily be replaced. He begins fighting with one eye on the battlefield and the other on his fuel gauge. Patton, by contrast, fights with confidence that another convoy is already on the road. That difference changes everything. As Allied forces tighten their grip on Tunisia, the initiative slips away from the Axis. German commanders become increasingly reactive. Instead of shaping the battlefield, they struggle simply to hold it. Positions once defended aggressively are abandoned because supply lines cannot sustain them. Counterattacks grow smaller. Retreats become more frequent. The confidence that had defined the Afrika Korps begins to erode. Not because its soldiers have lost their courage, but because they are confronting an enemy whose strength lies beyond the battlefield itself. An enemy powered by factories, shipyards, railroads, oil fields, and an industrial system capable of feeding a modern army without pause. For the first time, many German officers begin to understand a harsh reality. They are no longer fighting only Patton. They are fighting the full weight of American industry. And no battlefield victory can permanently defeat that. In May 1943, the North African campaign comes to its end. More than 250,000 Axis soldiers are captured in Tunisia, a loss often compared to another Stalingrad, because of its scale. The Afrika Korps, once a symbol of German offensive brilliance, ceases to exist as an effective fighting force in Africa. Rommel himself has already left the theater due to illness before the final surrender, but the campaign has revealed a truth that will echo throughout the remainder of the war. The United States Army that stumbled at Kasserine Pass is gone. In its place stands a force that combines aggressive leadership, disciplined logistics, overwhelming production, and a relentless operational tempo. It is a combination that Germany will encounter again, in Sicily, in France, and deep inside the Third Reich itself. Because Tunisia was never just the end of one campaign. It was the beginning of a new kind of American warfare, one that would only grow stronger as the war continued. The campaign in North Africa ended not with a single dramatic battle, but with an entire army running out of time. The Afrika Korps had not forgotten how to fight. Its officers remain among the most experienced in Europe. Its soldiers still possess discipline, courage, and tactical skill. Yet none of those qualities could overcome an enemy that recovered faster than it could be defeated. For years, Germany had perfected the art of winning campaigns through speed. Now it had encountered an opponent capable of matching that speed and sustaining it indefinitely. That was a true turning point. The American victory in Tunisia did more than secure North Africa. It transformed how the U.S. Army viewed itself. The humiliation of Kasserine Pass became a lesson rather than a scar. Officers who survived the defeat carried those lessons into Sicily, Normandy, the breakout from France, and the final drive into Germany. Mistakes were analyzed, procedures improved, training evolved. The army that landed in Normandy in June 1944 was far different from the one that had entered combat in Tunisia just 16 months earlier. It had learned to combine air power, artillery, armor, engineers, and logistics into a single coordinated force. And under commanders like Patton, it learned to keep moving. German commanders recognized the change. Capture reports and post-war accounts repeatedly describe the Americans as an enemy with extraordinary resources and an increasing ability to translate those resources into operational power. Where Germany relied on battlefield brilliance, the United States added another dimension, the ability to replace losses faster than they occurred, to repair faster than equipment could be destroyed, to advance faster than defenses could be rebuilt. That combination proved devastating, because even the most brilliant tactical victory meant little if the enemy returned stronger a week later. George S. Patton understood something that remains true in modern warfare. A battle is rarely won by the first attack. It is won by the side that can maintain momentum after the attack. Every hour saved, every convoy delivered, every bridge repaired, every radio message transmitted without delay. These seemingly ordinary actions became weapons, invisible to civilians, often overlooked by history, yet decisive on the battlefield. Patton's genius was not simply inspiring soldiers to fight. It was building an army that could fight, recover, and fight again without losing its rhythm. The legacy of North Africa reached far beyond the desert. The systems refined there became the foundation for later Allied victories. The rapid exploitation across France after the Normandy breakout. The long supply lines that stretched from the beaches to the German border. The coordination between air power, artillery engineers, and armor columns. All reflected lessons first tested under fire against the Afrika Korps. The American way of war had evolved, not around a single weapon, not around a single commander, but around the idea that logistics, mobility, leadership, and industrial strength were inseparable. Future armies around the world would study those principles for decades. The irony was impossible to ignore. The Germans entered North Africa believing they faced an inexperienced army backed only by factories. They left knowing those factories had become part of the battlefield itself. Steel mills had become arsenals. Assembly lines had become supply lines. And production schedules had become operational plans. In the end, the United States did not defeat the Afrika Korps through numbers alone. It defeated it by turning an entire nation's industrial strength into battlefield momentum. That was the real astonishment. Not that America built so many tanks, but that it learned to keep every one of them moving. History often remembers Erwin Rommel as a desert fox, a commander who mastered speed, surprise, and maneuver. It remembers George S. Patton as a general who demanded relentless movement and refused to let his army stand still. When those two philosophies met in North Africa, the result revealed the future of modern warfare, not the triumph of one man over another, but the triumph of an army that could adapt faster, move farther, and sustain the fight longer than its enemy. The road from the deserts of Tunisia did not end in Africa. It led to Sicily, to Normandy, across France, over the Rhine, and finally into the heart of Nazi Germany. The soldiers who had once been dismissed as amateurs became the spearhead of the Allied advance across Europe. Because wars are not won by the army that looks strongest on the first day. They are won by the army that learns the fastest, endures the longest, and never stops moving.